everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the newest drop from Charlotte Tilbury. This is her new Instant Look in an Eye palette. This is called the Stoned Rose palette. Now this palette was inspired by her lipstick. So this is the shade Stoned Rose in the Kissing formula. I'm wearing it right now. It's a beautiful shade. But she decided to, create a palette inspired by this lipstick. I actually bought the set because I didn't have this lipstick in my collection, and her Kissing formula is one of my favorites. So this set retailed for $103. As usual, this palette retails for $75, just like the other two Look in an Eye palette. So recently I talked about this one. This one has been one of my favorites since I bought it. This is the Gorgeous Glowing Beauty. And I actually even talked about this in my November favorites because I've really, really loved this palette. I don't have the other one, but I do have this one. So in this video, I'm going to be, creating a look with it, applying it on the face, and then I'm going to be doing a lot of comparisons because as you guys know, I love Charlotte Tilbury. It's one of my favorite brands and I have several of her stuff in my collection. So in the video, I compare it to the Film Star Bronze and Glow in the Fair and Medium because I wanted to see what the bronzer looks like and the highlighter looks like, compared to this one. And also I'm comparing it to the new little mini palette. This is the Easy Eye palette. This is the Charlotte Darling palette. And this just recently launched, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, maybe something like that. So I compare it to this one in several swatches. I've been swatching for like an hour. I also compare it to the newest holiday palette. This is the Starry Eyes to Hypnotize palette. I actually compare it to, the first 6 shades in the palette in case you guys have this one. And then I also compare it to last year's holiday palette, which is the Stars in Your Eyes palette. When I saw this collection, it just looked so much of the same, and I feel like we're getting into that when it comes to Charlotte Tilbury. There's a lot of repetitiveness going on within her brand. It says it's a stoned rose, but I would say it's more of like a peachier type of undertone palette. Very warm toned. I would not say it's a rose. So for those of you out there who were wanting to buy this palette thinking it was more of like the rosy, like mauve-y tones, it's definitely not a rosy mauve based palette. It's more of like a peachier mauve. It's got a peachy base. That's what we're going to be doing in today's video. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the actual application, applying it on the face, showing you guys, how they wear, how they look when you're applying them. Then we'll get into the swatches and then we will get into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. Okay, so let's break into this palette. I love the actual packaging of this palette. I wish the palette on the inside had the same packaging though. Like, how beautiful would this have been if this would have been on this part of it? This is really pretty. Like, whoever designed this is absolutely beautiful. And it would have been nice to have the outside look like that, but so this is the inside of the palette. So you have the I1, I2, I3, and you have these 2 peach right here, the bronzer and the highlighter. So I haven't put any contour or anything on. The only thing that I have on right now is my foundation, my brows done, my concealer done, and my eyeshadow primer on. That's it. I'm going to take my bronzer brush. This is the bronzer brush from Refer. It's my favorite bronzer brush of all time. I'm obsessed. And I'm going to go into the bronzer. It's a little warmer, so I was expecting it to be a little cool toned, but it's actually got a warm base to it. And if you look at it, it also has a little bit of spark in it. So it has a little bit of shimmer, not a lot though, but just a little bit. Now I will put some powder on and kind of buff it out. But what I like to do is take my brush, wipe off the brush, and then just kind of really buff it into the skin. Now let's move on to the blush. I'm going to take my Refer number 4 brush and I'm going to go into this one right here and maybe pick up a little bit of this. So I'm going to first pick up this. That's pretty pretty bright though. Ooh, it's a lot. I think I picked up too much on this side. Now I will put some powder on this and kind of diffuse this. So when I first apply bronzer and blush, it looks a little bit sharp. And then once I kind of diffuse it with a little bit of powder, it kind of melts it back into the skin. So I'm gonna go into the cheek number 5 and just put it right over top and just see what it does to the blush. Oh, that's pretty. It kind of makes it a little bit more shimmery. I'm going to take some of the Charlotte Tilbury Magic Powder and just kind of buff this into the skin and kind of diffuse that a little bit. See how much better that looks after you diffuse it? It looks a little bit crazy on this side, but once you put a little bit of powder on it, it just kind of like diffuses it and kind of melts it into the skin a little bit better. I'm going to put a little bit of bronzer up on my forehead. That was the one thing I didn't do. So this bronzer is pretty pigmented actually. Kind of diffuse the forehead. The blush is really, really pigmented, so I recommend going in with a pretty light hand. I think I went in with a heavy hand, but it's pretty though. Now let's go into the highlighter. I'm gonna take my Syracuse Designer Pro Brush, and I'm gonna grab the Face number 7 highlight. It kind of reminds me of the highlighter in this Film Star Bronze and Glow, just by the way that it applies. Now that I have used this formula of hers, this is the Magic Star. I like the way this applies a little bit more than I do the formula in this. It's pretty, but you can kind of see it sitting on the skin. But once I tried this Magic Star highlighter, I'm obsessed with this type of a formula because I feel like it blends into the skin a little bit better and you can't see it sitting on the skin quite like you can with this palette, but that looks really pretty though. Okay, so let's get started on the eyes. So obviously you could use any shade you want in this entire palette for your eyes, but these 3 here on the top are the ones that she created for the eyes. We're gonna first start with shade number 1. I'm gonna put that all over my lid. It's got like her typical, you know, Charlotte Tilbury formula where it's really soft on the eye. Kind of bringing that up into the crease part. I like to do that to kind of brighten up the eye a little bit. And also kind of in the inner corner. I'm going to take a pencil brush and I'm going to bring that right here on the inner corner and like bring it down along the lower lash line a little bit just to kind of really open up the eye. I'm going to take my mini booster from my Sky Set from Syracuse. I'm going to first go into the Enhance shade, which is the middle one, the number 2. Let's like start sweeping that into the crease a little bit just to kind of carve out my crease. I always like a little bit of shimmer in the crease, especially when you're using a palette like this. It's got a really pretty peachy base to it. So I'm just kind of going all over the crease with that shade. And it's not extremely pigmented, but in the crease, it looks really natural and really pretty. I'm gonna bring that on the lower lash line. Just one of those shades that has some shimmer to it, but it's very soft on the eye. Okay, now I'm gonna go into the Smoke shade. I'm going to grab a brush like this. I've wiped it off, but it's kind of dirty, but I have wiped off any residual shadow, and I'm going to kind of place the shade right here on this outer corner and just kind of buffing it. With shadows like these, there's really nothing you can do to mess them up. I think that's the thing that I do appreciate about the Charlotte Tilbury shimmers, is that they are just that type of formula where you really can't mess it up, you know? Like you can kind of place it anywhere you want, kind of blend it out, and it just kind of gives you that effortless look where it looks really pretty, but it doesn't look like you tried too hard. I'm going to bring a little bit of that smoke shade here on the lower lash line, kind of keeping it towards the outer part of the outer corner of my eye. Okay, I'm going to grab some brown eyeliner. So I'm going to grab this one from Marc Jacobs, and I'm going to go right against the lash line. And I'm going to go on the upper waterline on both sides. Now that I threw on some mascara, which I just used what came in like the samples, you got to choose like 2 samples when you ordered. So I grabbed this, which is the full fat lashes, and I just put mascara on. I didn't put any false lashes on. So I got the bundle, which came with her kissing formula. This one is in the shade Stoned Rose. I don't have this shade, so I thought, why not? So this is what the shade looks like. It's pretty peachy. I wouldn't say it's rosy. Love her kissing formula. It's one of my favorite like glossy lipstick formulas. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I did line my lips with the iconic nude lip liner from Charlotte Tilbury just to kind of give me a little bit of guard so that I don't have it all over my lips. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on. So this is the final look for the Stoned Rose palette, and everything matches really pretty. Because the lipstick is definitely got more of a peach kind of golden undertone, and so does the shadows. I don't know, it doesn't feel rose, like the colors don't feel rosy to me at all. They feel extremely peachy, which you guys know I love peach. But this is really pretty. This turned out really pretty. Okay, so now that we made it through the tutorial, let's go ahead and jump into the swatches, and then I will get into my full final thoughts. I'm going to compare this palette to as many Charlotte Tilbury products as I have in my collection. So we're going to go through those swatches right now, and I will be back to give you guys my full final thoughts. Okay, so now that we've made it through the swatches, let me get into my final thoughts. So as you guys saw in the swatches, this palette is definitely very dupeable within her own brand. You already have this one, which is her little mini. This is the Easy Eye palette. You pretty much already have this palette because there are definitely some similar shades. Not exact, but very similar. But let me say this about the palette itself. I don't really like how this shade and this shade are pretty much the exact same shade. You guys, there is no difference between these two shades. Like, Nothing. They're exactly the same shade. And I just don't get that. Like, why have a palette with 7 shades with 2 of those 7 being pretty much the exact same thing? Because I could use this as a highlighter. It's not like the shade is too big or it applies differently. It applies the exact same way as it does the highlighter. So when I reviewed this palette, the thing that I would have changed, I really like this palette. The thing I would have changed in this palette is the fact that I would have preferred this to be the blush and this to be like a highlighter, just because it's kind of hard to get the, you know, like a blush brush inside of here. I feel the exact same way on this palette, even though I think the shades in here are really pretty. If you have a lot of Charlotte Tilbury like I do, you definitely don't need this palette. You have this palette in so many different Charlotte Tilbury products. Even the palette from last year. So this is the Stars in Your Eyes palette. Like, even if you use these first shades right here, you can create similar looks in this palette. Also, even in the Starry Eyes to Hypnotize, you know, these first shades up here, these first 6, you're going to be able to create kind of the same look. I don't think they're going to be different enough to say that you need both in your collection. When I am comparing palettes, I'm looking for definite differences between them. And based on this palette, swatching it next to a lot of Charlotte Tilbury products that I have, there's just not enough difference to make this worth it. Now, if you don't have any of the palettes that I've mentioned, this might be a nice addition. So if you don't have this palette from last year, or this palette from this year, or even this new little mini one, then I would recommend getting something like this, because, you know, the shades are really beautiful. They apply beautifully, they're easy to use. But if you have those, you guys, skip this. It's just not worth it. I think that it's $75, in my opinion, it's just not different enough to make it worth the splurge. But this highlighter, again, same highlighter as this. Like, I don't get it. Like, I love Charlotte Tilbury, but this repetitive stuff, I mean, those are pretty much the same. So this is the highlighter from the Film Star Bronze and Glow. This is the highlighter from this palette, and they're pretty much the same. So I just don't get all of this repetitive products that she keeps releasing. The thing that I also don't prefer is the highlighter and bronzer are the exact same in both of these palettes. Like, why do that? Here's the thing, and I'm going to say this in a very loving way. You guys know that Charlotte Tilbury is one of my favorite brands. But I'm kind of feeling like these brands think that we're just completely stupid. I just don't understand, why do you have to make the exact same shade of the bronzer and the highlighter in both of these palettes? Why do that? It's a waste of our money. We're paying $75 for a palette like this, and you give us the exact same shades as the bronzer and the highlighter. These are exactly the same. Like, I don't get it. I can't stand behind that. It drives me crazy. Maybe we are allowing these brands to get away with all these repetitive shades. I know that even Pat McGrath, you know, she released products that have been like her Divine Rose palette. Like 2 or 3 of those shades were repeat shades that she has in other palettes. I just don't like that. I don't like how these brands are becoming so repetitive. Now, don't get me wrong, Charlotte Tilbury is way worse than Pat McGrath when it comes to repetitive shades and using the same shade or the same family over and over and over and over and over. Like, she uses the same shade family more than anybody I know. And I just don't get it. Now, why? And here's my other thing. Why release this now? Why not wait until like Valentine's Day or make this like a spring palette? If you've already bought this one, I actually really liked this one. These are shades that I don't really have in my collection, okay? So I really liked this palette. This palette I felt like was a little bit different than what I had. But then you get this palette where you have the bronzers and the highlighters that are exactly the same. If you have these 2 palettes right here in your collection, you already have this. All of these shades up here are very similar to this. I mean, now don't get me wrong, yes, you don't have the blush, but you really don't need the blush. Like, we've probably got plenty of blushes in our collection. I mean, let's just get real. Especially if you're like a makeup hoarder like I am. I got plenty of blushes, and don't get me wrong, I think these always, her face products always apply beautifully on the face. I'm not being mean. You guys know I love Charlotte Tilbury, but I just don't like this. I just wish that this palette had something different. I was hoping that the highlighter would be maybe a little bit more golden, you know, or it just, yeah, no, it just isn't that different. It's the exact same stuff. I'm just getting really tired of the repetitive products that these brands just keep launching because they know that we're going to buy it. And the only way to stop it from happening is that if we stop buying it. With all of that said, I actually, the lippy, I love the lippy. It's got this perfect peachy tone. I didn't have this in my collection. I'm super happy to have it. It's really beautiful, and you know, I have not reapplied it since, you know, I went off camera. I've been swatching for probably 30 or 40 minutes, and this is what it looks like 30 or 40 minutes later. I do really like her kissing formula. It's one of my favorite formulas from her because it does give me that long lasting. It doesn't last as long as like the Matte Revolution, but it lasts well enough, and it still gives my lips that nice gloss. I actually really like the shade. So sound off down below. Let me know how you guys are feeling. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. If you guys were considering buying this, I hope that this review was helpful for you and the swatches and all of that. If you have any questions, I will definitely answer them to the best of my ability. I love you all so much. I hope you guys have a wonderful day filled with love and joy. I will see you guys in my next video, and I love you all so much. Bye.